At the age of 6, my body was disabled by society. From this moment onward, others began to label me as disabled. However, despite this, I did not readily accept myself as disabled until more than 9 years later. The CDC states that 1 in 4 Americans currently identify as living with a disability, making this a large minority group. So why was I so reluctant to accept myself as disabled if it is such a common experience? From a very young age, I became aware of the negative stereotypes, misconceptions, and discrimination that disabled people face on a day-to-day basis simply just for existing. My awareness of this caused me to disidentify from my disability to a point of detriment to both my mental and physical well-being. Time and time again, I was told that my body was deviant. I began to believe this and started wishing for a body that was not my own. I wished for a body that was more aligned with the mythical norm. My hesitation to accept myself as disabled can be attributed to the much wider problem of ableism. Ableism is the oppression that is rooted in centuries of injustice and discrimination against disabled people. Ableism, at its core, holds the belief that those who are disabled are less than those who are non-disabled. Ableism not only affects those who are born disabled or who become disabled later in life, but also those who are simply perceived by others to be disabled. Ableism is extremely difficult not to be complicit in because it is woven into the structures of our society. In fact, as time has moved forward, ableism has been able to morph to fit our societal norms, making it even more hidden. Because of this, ableism is very easily produced, perpetuated, and reinforced by non-disabled people and even by disabled people like myself. Ableism can be found almost anywhere, including on the apps of our phones. In 2019, TikTok began to suppress the content by its disabled creators. They did this with the assumption that this would end the cyberbullying of disabled creators. This, of course, worked because how can you be bullied if no one can see you? Now, in 2023, non-disabled TikTok creators take part in a trend where they try to catch disabled people faking their disability. These cruel videos perpetuate the invalidating idea that all disabilities should look the same and use disability as a punchline. These videos are still available on the platform. It is clear that these platforms are mimicking our attitudes surrounding disability. We can no longer excuse holding on to the harmful beliefs that surround the lived identity and experience of those who are disabled. We must exist beyond this by resisting it. It is my goal to share with you all today how we can exist beyond ableism through the radical acceptance of all bodies and minds. Radical acceptance begins when we question our own perception of disability. So I want to ask you all a couple of questions. What is your perception of disability? What has shaped your perception of disability? Perhaps a non-disabled source? Within your perception of disability, do you hold those who are disabled equally important to those who are not disabled? What about protection? Do you believe that those who are disabled deserve the same amount of protection as those who are not? After reflecting on your answers to these questions, tell yourself that disability is a neutral way of existence. Disability just is. Those who are disabled deserve both agency and value. This radical acceptance will allow us to go beyond the confines of narrow-mindedness which uphold ableism and allow us to acknowledge that all disabled people deserve both agency and value. We currently accept that no individual is the same. We welcome differences. So why does it seem that we expect all disabilities to be the same in our vastly differing bodies and minds? Realizing that disability is not a monolith allows us to go beyond the controlling stereotypes that help propel ableism. With this being said, if someone tells you that they are disabled, trust their word. It is not our job as both disabled and non-disabled people to police someone else's ability. Equally important to this is realizing someone's disability. We should be conscious of one's disability. Oftentimes, people tell me that they do not see me as a disabled person, but rather see me as a person. Outright ignoring my own or others' lived experiences allows for the lack of acknowledgement of deep-seated ableism and systemic barriers that disabled people face. Equally harmful to this is the portrayal of disabled folks as tragic or inspirational. Existing with a disability is completely ordinary. To nurture this radical acceptance, we should strive for the early education of disability so that others must not unlearn ableism. I say this because disability is rarely spoken of within our classrooms. In fact, for me, the first time disability was spoken of in the classroom setting was just last semester in an upper-level university course. Disability education should begin in elementary school and continue to these university courses. Equally important to this early education of disability is the visibility of disabled folks, especially in these classrooms. Today, disabled children are still being separated from their peers. In fact, in 2020, the National Center for Educational Statistics found that less than 1/3 of students with multiple disabilities, deaf, blindness, and intellectual disabilities spent more than 80% of their time in general classrooms. What kind of message is he sending to the children in these classrooms if their disabled peers are not fully integrated into these classes? By not featuring disabled people in our lives, they become out of sight and out of mind, thus continuing the cycle. To end this cycle, we must consider accessibility in everything that we do. This not only means early education and visibility that I have just mentioned, but it can also be much simpler. It can look like making your social media posts accessible, seeking out non-disabled sources to better understand the experiences of those who are disabled, removing ableist language from your vocabulary, and lastly, but most importantly, including disabled people within your advocacy. Please note that I do not speak for all disabled folks, but rather am sharing my own experiences and thoughts. It is my hope that everyone in this room continues to consciously challenge their own perception of disability. Together, let us go beyond the confines of ableism and exist beyond it through radical acceptance to the deserved agency and value of all of those who are disabled.